Hello folks. After much research on the internet, I finally decided to purchase the Grizzly G1023RLX cabinet saw. This is a left tilting cabinet saw that has the 52-inch extension table, and based on all the reviews I read online, I heard this is a pretty good saw. I also spoke to the folks at Grizzly, and they told me this is a great saw. So hopefully, based on the initial reaction, at least when I took the cover off, as you can see, the saw actually does come fully prepared for shipment. It's on a heavy wooden pallet. It was surrounded by cardboard and plastic, and it looks like it made the trip all the way from Taiwan pretty nicely. This saw was recommended from the Grizzly folks. Based on the fact that this saw actually comes from Taiwan, and it is, from what I understand, incorporates some of the latest features like a serpentine belt versus the triple V belts, and several other things that seemed like they were great ideas, including a riving knife, etc. So having been a Delta Unisaw owner in the past, I've had an older model and a fairly recent model. Finally decided to change up things and try a Grizzly. It's my intent to not only give you an idea how it is to put together, but also to give you an idea of exactly what it's going to take to tune the saw and how close it comes to some of the specifications that are important when setting up a table saw. After I get a little further, I'll be back. Okay folks, I thought I'd bring you up to speed. I've taken all of the cosmoline, or whatever they call that, junk that they put on the top of the saw. I've taken all of that off and also taken it off of the extension wing. As you can see, the surface of the saw is quite shiny, and I really do like the beveled edge on the front of the saw. I've also taken off the power switch because that'll get remounted later. It's actually temporarily held in position where one of the wings are. And I've also put on a couple of the handles on the adjustment wheels. So far everything is going smoothly. The top extension is not 100% perfect, but it's very, very close. They do give you some recommendations that you can actually shim that surface with some masking tape. I think I'm going to live with it for now. I would say it's just off by a couple of thousandths of an inch. If it doesn't create a problem when I actually start using the saw, which I don't think it will, I will actually use a little bit of probably some 300 grit or 320 grit wet dry sandpaper and just kiss that edge. But right now I don't think it's any worse than the Delta Unisaw I've had before. It looks pretty good. Next step is getting on the extension table. Okay folks, what you're seeing here is a woodpecker's saw gauge and a master plate. The master plate and the woodpecker's saw gauge is designed to check how parallel the slot in the table is of the saw with where the blade would normally be mounted. So essentially what this does is it allows you to see what kind of adjustment you have to make to the table top should it be out of alignment from the factory. In that case, if there is, you loosen the 4 bolts that attach the table to the frame of the saw, and you just gently make some taps to get it in alignment. Let's give this a shot. I've got it set up. As you can see, the dial indicator is at 0 here. And I'll gently move. Wow, this thing is almost perfect so far. I don't know if you can see this, folks, but this is moving less than 1/1000th of an inch. This is directly from Grizzly Factory. This is pretty impressive. I don't think I'm going to touch this. I think this is just absolutely as good as anyone can get it. I'm very impressed. Now I wonder whether I should have spent the $100 and some odd on the equipment to do this. But we'll also check the we'll also be able to check the run out on the fence, and that will be important as well. So far, so good. I don't have to do anything. Good job, Grizzly. Okay, folks, one of the other things you use the master plate for is to check and see indeed how perpendicular the blade will be to the table. Obviously, this is something you want to be 90 degrees. So I've taken and adjusted the master plate such that it's now facing, giving me as much surface above the table saw as I can. And now I have a 4-inch machinist square laying right up against that plate. Again, I have not touched anything from the factory settings. This is exactly how the saw was shipped to me. And as you can see, again, I'm not going to touch this saw. It's absolutely as flat as I can possibly. I see no light through the machinist square. Between the machinist square and the plate, looks absolutely 90 degrees, and I think that's about as good as anyone's going to ever make this saw. Again, good job, Grizzly. Considering the distance it's traveled, it stayed in great shape. Okay, folks, I've just about got the extension table in position. It is temporarily bolted, and I've run into my first issue. The issue concerns the legs that support the extension table. As you can see from this photo, I had to make some slots in the portion of the bracket that actually attaches to the top of the table. These are threaded, and I'm not really sure why they're threaded, because in order for you to get, there were no bolts left actually, and in order for you to get a bolt through the thickness of the extension table, through the angle bracket that supports the extension table, as you see here, it's actually going to go through those two holes at the end of the extension bracket or angle iron there. So the only way I could do that was by actually drilling a hole that would go through the wood and then elongating the holes on the legs. It's the only way I could get it to fit. So far, other than that, things are going as planned. Okay, this is the last setup here. I'm checking the parallelism of the shop fox fence that came with the saw with one of the slots in the table saw, one of the actual slots that are cut into the surface of the cast iron. As you can see, I've got this set at 0, and now I'm going to slide this along the surface. I have adjusted this a little bit already. You'll see a little bit of bumpiness as you travel along here. But there are a couple little spots of, just a few spots in the fence itself where it either bumps out or dips in. But overall, I think that's pretty fair. From one end to the other, I think there's not very much movement. So I'm going to run with this particular setup here, and that's the last setup I have before I actually put a blade on and hopefully start doing a little testing. The one slight disappointment with the saw so far probably has to do with the extension table and the legs. Once you modify them, you can see that they come out okay, and the legs are indeed adjustable. My thought process is to raise the table saw up about 1.5 inches, having it sit on some 2x4s, because I'm a little bit tall and I'm used to having my saws just a little taller than this one is. But overall, so far so good. We'll be doing the nickel test eventually and see how long we can get this thing running. Okay folks, this is one of the final tests. I have a Ridge Carbide combination blade in. It's the Ultra 2000. That is the one of the best blades on the market currently. If you haven't tried one, I strongly recommend it. In the interim, you can see that I have 3 nickels standing up. I am about to turn on the saw for the first time. Let's see what happens. Well, there you are, folks. Those nickels were very hard to stand up. Those nickels were very hard to stand up in the first place. But obviously, once the saw was started, those nickels didn't move. So again, I congratulate Grizzly on making a nice vibration-free saw, and I look forward to working with it.